Okay, so this will be the first of 3 videos that I'm going to put out. These are just some of the recap ones. I'm also giving a little bit more historical information concerning some Gatsby stuff. As you can see, again, here's the first of the slides. First things here, I'll just kind of hit these things quickly. Fitzgerald, born in 1896 and lived to 1940, named after Francis Scott Key, the composer of course, our national anthem. Fitzgerald was supposedly distantly related to him. One of the big things here, even though it's the smallest on this slide, is that he fought in World War I and witnessed all of that awfulness firsthand. He, along with Steinbeck and Hemingway, 3 of the writers around here, they were all over in World War II, although Steinbeck was only over as a journalist, but all 3 of them were over there and witnessed this new type of warfare with machine guns, trench warfare, all that, and all of the death involved in that. And all those people that came back, they were so affected by this that they're often known as the lost generation because they fought this war and they came back and they just weren't the same. It wasn't the same as fighting in the Civil War or even just like 15 years earlier, approximately. I don't remember the exact years, but even the Spanish-American War fought in Cuba was still much more of the style of like the Civil War as opposed to World War One. And basically, again, these guys just came back and they were just kind of ruins. So there's modernism, which is kind of the school of writing that comes after naturalism and what these guys are part of. It's pretty dark because of that. Beyond that, he married a woman named Zelda, who, for all accounts, is probably who Daisy Buchanan is partially based off of. Daisy, as you know by now, is of course a character in this book. A few fun facts: the creator of the Legend of Zelda was a big Fitzgerald fan and actually named Zelda the Zelda of the games after Fitzgerald's wife. And a second fun thing: the late comedian Robin Williams was a fan of the video game and named his daughter Zelda after that. So in a sense, Robin Williams' daughter, Zelda, is named after a video game character who is named after Zelda Fitzgerald. Not that that's terribly important, I just find it to be kind of fun. Other stuff. There's a lot of historical stuff going on here that is important. So, a big part of this story is that this is, of course, set in the 1920s, during the time that Prohibition is enacted. So, as you can see here, the Prohibition Amendment, the 18th Amendment, was passed in 1919 and banned the production, sale, and consumption of alcohol in the United States. It was a huge failure. You'll see all the stuff happening in the story, especially with anyone who's on the wealthier side. They can very easily get alcohol, but it seems like virtually everyone in this story can get alcohol, whether they're rich or poor. And again, that amendment was eventually repealed because this basically, as we got down here, led to just a huge black market that arose. This is where a lot of the Italian mobster mafia stuff arose from. And as we saw in the the History Channel's Story of Us, this is really what kind of started people like Al Capone, because they could deal in alcohol as contraband, and basically they could make a ton of money for it. There's a lot of other stuff, though. A lot of this gets to, of course, the stuff that we've already talked about. The whole idea of huge expansion of industry led to, of course, an expansion of available goods, more leisure time. You'll see that the people in the story, part of it is just that they're super wealthy, but they don't have anything they have to do, really. You kind of see Gatsby almost do a little bit of work from time to time, but it's not work in the sense that we think of it. And of course, all of this leads to these things that we've already talked about: transportation, communication expanding, and things like consumer products being available nationwide leads to more of a homogenized national culture, which leads to a sort of culture and celebrity worship. And that's kind of what you're going to see with this idea of worshiping the upper class, worshiping people like Gatsby or Tom Buchanan, seeing them as the goal in a sense. And we get to all this stuff where, again, the rich people are able to pump out all this with unskilled labor. It becomes easier to get workers, which meant wages drop because now you don't have to know how to do anything to make shoes. You just have to know how to, basically just have to be able to be taught how to work whatever part of the machinery in the factory that you're working at is. So with that type of stuff, and the fact that generally until sort of the New Deal with FDR, there weren't that many social safety nets and socialist policies to keep them safe. we get to an incredible amount of income inequality, which the reason that I took this long trip to get to income inequality is because that's kind of what we see with again, people like the Buchanans and Gatsby, and even lesser so, but still Nick Carraway and Jordan Baker, who are very, very wealthy. And on the other far side of that, of course, we have people like the Wilsons. And as you can see here, this is 1923 to 1929. 1929 was when the stock market crashed. Here we had the same type of thing happening before the crash that was in '07 and '08. So I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to pretend to know that that's definitely going to happen every time, but it at least happened in both of these times. So that is basically it for this first video. Now we'll get into the chapter recaps.